For me, it felt like a huge blessing to have a sense of purpose while being out there, because when you see these things going down right in front of you, you know, everything your gut is telling you to either run and just get out of there, or to really put your body in the middle of it and, you know, stand up and do something, but you feel this need to do something in the moment to just, you know, fight or flight. And so to have this sense of purpose and to have this idea that we were doing something that was going to outlast this particular moment, I think it really gave me something to hold on to during those really chaotic moments. And you know, there wasn't ever really a sense that Darren Wilson was going to get convicted. There's a scene that didn't make it into the film where people are preparing for the decision to come down, and they're talking about, you know, the tactics that they're going to use, and somebody raises their hand and they're like, well, what do we do if Darren Wilson actually does get invited? And the whole room just erupts in laughter. So when you're in this kind of, you know, realistically pessimistic environment, but people are still making this decision to go out, and there's this sense of futility. I think having a sense of purpose is just one of the biggest gifts that you can have. And I think what I hope people take away from this film is that, you know, you can make yourself useful in supporting and upholding your community, and in the process of even fighting for this justice, you can find that purpose, you can find that thing to hold on to. It may not be the utopia, we may not ever get there and see it for ourselves, but just that act of standing with people in those moments can be so rewarding and so healing.
Well, for me personally, like, I think it was like, I didn't, there wasn't a clear distinction between the two. You know what I mean? Like I was in the mix, and it's a funny story about how me and Sabaah met, because I didn't, like a lot of these people I didn't meet as a documentary filmmaker. I didn't meet them with a camera. I was in the mix with them, like I was either organizing or I was on the street with them. And Sabaah and them were filming without, like, they were just filming, you know what I mean? A lot of people trying to get us together. When we combined forces, it was a different thing. But it was very hard for me. And I remember certain times when me and Sabaah would tell our DP, Lucas, to stop. Like, no, this is not the time to be trying to follow people. Like, we need to be here for our friends. We need to talk. Or like, maybe you should keep rolling. And I remember her telling people, like, telling them in moments, like, stay focused on this thing and that, like, even if it makes you uncomfortable, shoot that, you know what I mean? So it was a line that I'm really glad that it was two people in it, because we would have missed things if one person couldn't shut off emotion, or one person couldn't turn on emotion, you know what I mean? Yeah. It was a back and forth. So like, the line didn't really exist for me. I just didn't, you know, I was just living through it. I'm gonna keep it real with you, you know what I'm saying? Like, there's no way for us to get every perspective into a movie. So no matter what happens, there's always gonna be people that feel like they weren't spoken for. But we did show the movie to the main people that we followed. And it was a magical moment, because in a real life setting, those people do not talk to each other anymore. Those people have differences. Those people have different philosophies about how to get free. They have different ideas. But for a moment in time, they forgot about that, and they remembered why they all came out there for a second. And there was no bickering, there was no beef. And they all felt good about the way we portrayed them. They talking all this Oscar talk and all that, but like, that's the Oscars for us. You know what I'm saying? When the people that we told a story about are okay with the way they got themselves portrayed, that's the reward. You know what I mean? Because we didn't come into it to get on or to do any of those things. We came into it to tell a true story that and create a mirror where people be reflected back. So personally for me, when we premiered in St. Louis on the 11th, is the big hurrah for me. I really want to see what the average people and the people that weren't in the movie that were a part of it had to say about it. But I'm confident that people were really going, you know, they're gonna get down with it.
I don't know, for me as a filmmaker, one thing that I learned early in production and has really stuck with me is, like, you let that stuff go as soon as it happens. I couldn't tell you. There are so many moments that, even things that I lived through that we couldn't capture on film, I think there's a quote that goes, "You never finish a film, you abandon it." Yeah, but you know, when it comes out on DVD, there will definitely be some interviews and stuff that didn't make it in, but I really have no regrets about this film, and I have to commend my editor, my DP, my co-director, our story consultant, Carol Dysinger. I mean, I think people just came together and pulled off something really incredible, and it really feels like the work that we set out to make.
I rest with Sabaah. One thing that I wish was everybody thought like me, so I could get like, so I wouldn't have to do so much explaining, and we could put everybody's perspective in it. But that is a fantastical reality that will never ever exist. But that's it. I wish we didn't have to pick 1 or 2 people, because in the beginning we was trying to follow like 7 people, and I wish we could do that coherently, and people would understand stories that way. But if you weren't there, you couldn't understand all that stuff. So
it's interesting. There are parts that are kind of like a little cheeky, and it's interesting to see where people laugh, where people kind of vocally react, and they don't. And I think it varies. It's varied from state to state, city to city. You know, we took it overseas a couple months ago, and people were just dead silent. I think people were just. We did a screening in Cape Town, we did a screening in Oslo, and one at Sheffield in Northern England, also London. And people there were much quieter, and I think people were just in such deep shock because they didn't know that this could happen on American soil. And then, you know, conversely, I showed it. I was at the Pan-African Film Festival, and wasn't able to make it to that screening, but that was like, it was shown at the Crenshaw Cinemark 15 in the Baldwin Hills Plaza, and that's the mall where I grew up in. It was like a lot of my friends and family there. People were laughing and talking through the whole entire thing, and you know, so it really does vary by audience and you know what the mood in the room is. Black people watch movies, but it was great. It was as it intended. And there's a lot of humor in this film, and it's there on purpose because sometimes things are just so absurd that you have to laugh. And I think it wasn't in a disrespectful way. It was more just people like, oh my God, can you believe this? And you know, really picking up on those little ironies that were in the film. The purpose of these screenings right now is to bring people just like you into the space with us, people who maybe do have the means to reach a little bit further, so that we can make these connections and have these collaborations. The film is going to premiere in theaters nationwide August 11th. We can connect after this and put you in touch with our grassroots organizer who's doing these kind of, you know, non-theatrical screenings and group sales and discounts. And, you know, we really do want to make a big splash in theaters because I think it, first of all, viewing it in a community setting I think is important, but also it sends a message to the larger world about the viability of Black documentaries. But through the fall and the winter, we definitely want to focus on getting into schools. We want to work with educators to build out a curriculum. I think this film has a long life ahead of it, and we're absolutely interested in that work. I've been a cynical person for a really long time. So when I saw Obama get elected, I'm like, look at this light-skinned man with all these sweet, sweet words. What does hope and change mean? Hope for what? Change for whom? And I was always really skeptical because he was so shiny, but I didn't really understand, you know, what I was being offered that was different from what somebody else was giving me. So this wasn't necessarily a radical change in perspective. But we hope that, you know, the way that we treated Obama was to kind of send the message that, you know, a system is not necessarily vulnerable to one individual player. And I think we all know in our hearts that Obama, you know, he came out and said Trayvon could have been his son. You see his beautiful Black family, and you know that he's aware of these issues. But he had to be a president for America. And sometimes I think, you know, what would have happened if he had chosen a side? If you look at the polarization of just him being the president, he could have possibly, you know, endangered even more people by choosing a side. And then on the other hand, how could he not, as the president of the United States, come to this place when there's this massive, you know, state of emergency going on? You've got the National Guard coming in, all these high stakes. And so, you know, I think that he wasn't necessarily in a position to make any of those changes, and the message for me was that we cannot continue to try to rely on these figures, these figureheads, these people who are functionally in our lives little more than reality TV stars. And I think
Right now you're thanking God that that's the case, actually, though. The fact that the president only has a limited amount of power in reality is, right now, it's kind of a good thing.
I guess, man. You know what I'm saying? I'm gonna go on a limb, and I did drink the Kool-Aid. I'm from Illinois. I drove like with my homies in the middle of the night to go see Obama speak in Springfield in 2008, and I believed in the second coming. You know what I'm saying? And then when he got there, and black folks really needed him, like when they the civil rights movement popped off again on your watch, and when we needed him, he wasn't there. You know what I'm saying? And I mean around the corner from where you built your constituency. You from Chicago, like, you know what I'm saying? So like I wasn't that cynical, but once it happened, it was like that was just a clear moment for me, just knowing that like all American presidents don't really give a shit about black people. You know what I mean? All of them, the United States is a corporation and they are CEOs. That does not make them shareholders. You know what I mean? They just the person to show up and tell you you've been fired. They are the face, but they are not the people that call the shots. And it was an adult moment for me, a clear adult moment for me.
we had a lot of really interesting conversations off the record with people, and they did say the types of things that you would expect. And people were very, very nervous about the security of their jobs. We talked to police officers who were actually facing legal persecution for trying to speak up and speak out. You know, we talked to folks who were just, on the force trying to make a way and weren't willing to talk on camera. And so there was a lot of tension around that. And even when we did speak to public officials, they would say, we spoke with the mayor, we spoke with the police chief, and they would say what they needed to say on camera, and then the cameras would stop rolling, and they'd be like, actually. And so that's the reason why a lot of them didn't end up in the film, is because this was above all a human story, and nobody was, on that side of the fence, nobody was really willing to break character with us on screen. We didn't make this to try to teach white people about what it's like to be a black person under oppression. We made this to reflect the experience of living through this back to people who lived through it with dignity and with honor, with beauty, and we had faith that as human beings, because we are all human and because we all do feel these same emotions, we all care about our families and what's the best for ourselves and our lives, that everybody would be able to resonate with it. And I think, that's kind of what happened.
Absolutely.